Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday's episode of Trending, brought to you by Iconic Coffee. I'm Jaymie. It's good to be back with you. Not been in this chair for a couple of weeks now. Thanks to Gareth and Rich for covering. I've got a nice week away, as hopefully you can tell by a nice tan. But we're back into it, and so much has happened this week and in the last few days to talk about. It's been very difficult just to pick 3 or 4 things to discuss. So we're going to start over in the Middle East, where Donald Trump, US President Donald Trump, is over there doing a tour of Middle Eastern nations. He's been in Saudi Arabia, he's heading to Qatar, he's heading to the UAE, and he's also, I believe now, heading to Syria, which is what we're going to discuss here. So late yesterday evening, along with another range of things that were announced, after the meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who we'll come to in a minute, Donald Trump announced that the US would be lifting all sanctions on the state of Syria. Now, through the last few years, since the civil war broke out in 2011, there has been incredible sanctions in Syria that have made it impossible, basically, for anything and anyone to invest in the country, and it's made it incredibly difficult for people there to have any kind of prosperous life. Now, at the back end of last year, the then President of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, was overthrown by a number of rebel groups, which you can trace their funding back to Western sources. Now, the guy that is the interim leader in Syria is a guy who was designated a terrorist, who is the leader of an organization that have been designated by the US, by the UN, by the UK, and other European and NATO nations as a terrorist organization. Yet, as soon as he came into power, all of a sudden then that is pushed to one side and forgotten. Now, the reason I think that this is important is because essentially, I'm not going to come here and be a mouthpiece for Assad. I don't know what the Assad regime was like. I can only speak from the experience that I can relate to, and that's that in 2010, I believe it was, 2009, my mum went out to Syria, spent a couple of weeks there, said it was absolutely brilliant, said that the people were living good lives, that it was very multicultural, that it was very diverse, and that different faiths and different cultures were respected, and actually written into law that minorities like Christians and so on in countries like that were actually protected and were treated in exactly the same way as Muslims. Now, since Assad has been overthrown, there has been a number of accounts, there's been a number of exposés of the targeting of minority groups. So just a few weeks ago, it was announced and it was highlighted that there was a massive violent culling, if you like, a mass killing of hundreds of civilians from what they call the Assad minority Alawite sect in the western coastal regions of Syria during clashes between the new security forces and what they're calling Assad loyalists. There's also been deadly clashes between the new security forces and people from what they call the Druze religious minority. Yet you don't see this publicized. You can see it in this story if you're looking deep into it, but it's not front page news. It's not, there's chemical weapons attacks. It's not making the headlines in the same way that anything related to Assad, many of which, particularly when you look at the chemical weapons supposed attacks, many of which, when you look into them, actually have no basis in fact and actually have no validity, and the arguments fall apart very, very quickly. They were front page news. You were told to be outraged by that. You were told that you needed to support military intervention in Syria. You needed to support the arming and funding of rebel groups designed to overthrow him. Yet when it comes to this, it's completely silent. And the reason I think that this is incredibly important is because it's changing the balance of power. So Donald Trump has announced that they're going to lift all the sanctions on Syria, and that basically he was convinced to do so by the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who I said we would talk about as well, which we're going to now. So you don't have to look very far back to remember the big controversy and the big scandal involving the Saudi journalist who was murdered, literally murdered and cut up with a bone saw in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Okay? That was proven, basically, that would have had to have been signed off, state-sponsored murder by Mohammed bin Salman. Jamal Khashoggi, I believe, was the journalist's name. The Saudis denied all knowledge of it for about a week until it got to the point that they couldn't deny the knowledge of it anymore. And then all of a sudden, they arrested a bunch of people and put them in jail. When things like that don't happen in countries like Saudi Arabia unless they are state sanctioned. Mohammed bin Salman is known as Mr. Everything because he's across everything. He knows everything that's going on. He has fingers in every pie. And it's very clear now that he has a massive influence, or they want you to believe that he has a massive influence, on the US president. And I've seen in the last 24 hours, US MAGA movement people and people here in the UK that sympathise with that MAGA movement, talking about how the US is back. We're back, baby. Look at the rollout the Saudis have given us. This means we're back. Have you ever looked into the Saudi regime and what they do to their people, what they do to their neighbours, what they've done in Yemen, what they did to that journalist, what they do to women? It's one of the most disgusting and oppressive regimes in the world. It's a terrorist regime. Have you ever looked at the Saudi involvement in 9/11? Few questions. Why you think it's a good thing that Trump is being idealized by a state like this? For me, this is just an example that the whole overthrowing of Assad and getting rid of that regime in there, these guys have done their job and now they're going to be rewarded for that. And the fact that, that this may lead to enormous suffering of people within the country of Syria, this new regime I'm talking about, that doesn't matter because they've done their job. They've overthrown this guy. And I understand this week as well that he's been invited to Britain, the Syrian leader, to meet the UK Prime Minister, Chairman Starmer. I understand that there's been calls now for this organisation that he is a part of to be declassified and delisted as being a terrorist organisation. I wouldn't be shocked if that happens in the coming days and weeks. It's very clear that this is a bizarre situation that we're seeing. And I think what's really interesting to point out is, I said this to somebody yesterday, for the sake of questioning the world, for the sake of calling out things as you see them, I actually think it would have been a much, much better situation if Kamala Harris had won this presidency. And the reason I say that is because if she'd have done exactly the same things that Donald Trump is doing right now, people would have been up in arms. People would have been calling it out. People would have been probably quite literally in the streets in some cases, protesting against what is being done. So what that would have done is that would have highlighted what is happening. It would have made people start to question. It would have made people start to look and ask more questions. However, because Donald Trump is apparently the savior and the MAGA movement believe that he is really their destiny to freedom and the way that we're going to change this whole direction of travel that the world is in, they're not questioning things that they would have questioned previously. So things like this and various other things, the investments in AI and others, they're going under the radar. They're going unquestioned. They're going undiluted. They're just happening. There's no lip service to try and keep people happy. They're just happening because people are under this false sense of security that their side is winning. And we spoke previously about what a brilliant trick it would be to convince people that the problem that we face, the problems that the world faces, they're all coming from the left. The left are the problem. This woke ideology, this woke mind virus, the deep state, it's all the left. Because then when the right get in power, people relax. People think, oh, it's okay, that's not in power anymore, so that's going to stop. When that's just a brilliant magician's trick. If a magician's playing a trick in his left hand, he wants you looking at his right and vice versa. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing here. They want you looking at the left as the problem. They want you looking at the left as the reason things are what they are, as the left as the reason that we're being taken in this direction. It's the Bill Gateses, it's the George Soroses, it's those figures. When those figures transcend party politics for a start. And secondly, since right-wing governments have been in power, what's actually changed? We supposedly have a right of centre government here in the UK for the last 14 years until the current one. What changed? There's supposedly a right-wing government in America right now. What's changed? The same agenda is continuing. Only now it's not being called out and it's not being questioned in the same way, which I would say is not an accident. Right, we're going to move on to this assisted dying bill story from here in the UK. Now, we've spoken about this extensively in the past as it was going through the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Well, now this story is related to the GP's reaction to it, so general practitioner doctors here in the UK. So apparently it's a very mixed and split response, very much down the middle. Family doctors in England are deeply divided on the issue of assisted dying. BBC research on plans to legalise the practice suggests the findings give a unique insight into how strongly many GPs feel about the proposed new law and highlight how personal beliefs and experiences are shaping doctors' views. More than 1,000 GPs have replied, with 500 telling us they were against the assisted dying bill and 400 saying they were in favour of it. I'm assuming the other 100 are sort of abstaining somewhere in the middle. Some of the 500 GPs told us who were against the law called the bill appalling, highly dangerous, cruel, and said we're doctors, not murderers. On the other side of the 400, they've said it's a basic human right and long overdue. We are keeping human bodies alive in the most inhumane manner. How do we ethically justify forcing these bodies to continue to exist in decrepitude? Well, I think, as I've said when we've covered this in the past, I think this bill is a stepping stone to what is going to come next. Now, the whole issue or whole discussion and debate over assisted dying, I don't think is a black and white story. If somebody was deeply ill, they physically were maybe in a condition where they couldn't move, they couldn't function, cognitively they weren't there, I can really understand why people consider and carry out assisted dying. I really can. I'm very sympathetic to that. If you're in an extreme amount of pain and you know that's only going to go and get any worse, if you want people to remember you for who you were rather than degenerating over a period of time, I do understand. I am sympathetic to that. I'm not sat here saying that I don't believe that there are cases where this is applicable. What I believe, however, is that this bill is not designed to protect and help people that are in those situations. Instead, it is designed to become a stepping stone, essentially, for assisted dying that is state sanctioned. It's not designed to be about whether you want to choose to end your life or not because you believe you're in pain. For me, it's about the essentially step one towards this demise pill that Dr. Richard Day spoke about in 1967, where essentially you reach a certain stage in your life and you take the pill and you go off the other end. Now, that sounds very extreme to many people watching this, in the society that we live in today. It sounds like a big jump from where we are now, from the discussions around this bill to that. I do appreciate that. However, everything starts with a step one. Everything starts with a foot in the door. Very rarely do things go from 0 to 100. We didn't start by having these in our pockets, controlling every aspect of our lives, with people scrolling 24/7. They started with a tiny phone that you could make calls and text people on. And in a not too lengthy time, they've turned into that. So the foot in the door moment is incredibly important. And it's incredibly important to highlight that this is where this could lead. So essentially, this demise pill concept that has been spoken about by many people previously and by people in positions of power who talk about the fact there is too many people on the planet, and people like Henry Kissinger who talked about useless eaters, people that are taking from the system but not paying into it, don't take into consideration that they may have paid into that system and probably did pay into that system for their entire lives, building the world that we have today, on the premise that they may get a few years at the end to enjoy. That's essentially a human life. You're born, you go to school, you get indoctrinated, and you get prepared for the workplace. Then you work, you pay your taxes. And if you're very lucky, you might get a few years at the end that are about you. And unfortunately for many people, by the time they get to those years at the end, they're either cognitively or physically not in the shape to be able to enjoy them in the way they would have done had they had those times to themselves in their 20s. That's the reality that we live in. That's the one we are sold. That's the one we are encouraged to believe is the dream. How about start living now? How about stop saving for a retirement that may never come? How about start living today? How about start enjoying your life today? Well, none of us are promised tomorrow. I digress. But the reason I think this story is important to continue highlighting is because we're going to see a lot of this in the next weeks, months, and years. We're going to see this story discussed. We're going to see it evolve. We're going to see it come into law. We're going to see people start to actually carry out assisted dying. Then you're going to see safeguards almost certainly be moved and goalposts be changed and parameters that allow people to qualify for assisted dying, they're going to be expanded. All of these things we're going to see in the coming weeks, months, and years. Right, next story is related to health, which any of you that watch my content or follow me on social media will know this is an area of great interest to me. Golden age weight loss pill that mimics gastric bypass op is hailed a miracle and is said to be better than fat jabs. Another story, NHS must accelerate the use of weight loss jabs, say obesity experts. Going to put it out there and say the obesity experts are probably obese. The NHS must accelerate the use of weight loss jabs, experts have said. What qualifies you to be an expert in obesity? That's my interest, my question. As society enters a golden age in such medications. Obesity is linked to numerous long-term health conditions, including cancer, heart disease, dementia, and diabetes, putting a huge strain on the NHS. Trials show that weight loss jabs such as Zempic and Wegovy are associated with reduced risk of 42 conditions, including cancer and cardiovascular disease. Worldwide, about 3.8 billion people, over 25 and just over 750 million children and young people are forecasted to be overweight and obese by 2050. Right, let's start here then. If you've got a problem and the problem is only getting worse, stop trying to fix the problem after it's become a problem. How about prevent the problem? Really simple, really simple. If you've got a growing population, which you have internationally, and there is a percentage of people that are obese, and that percentage stays the same, but the population increases, you're going to have more obese people. If that percentage increases and the population increases, all of a sudden it's going to be out of control, which is exactly what's happening. Hence why 3.8 billion people, which I believe will be about 40% of the planet. That's absolutely insane. And it's not happening because fat jabs and fat loss pills are not on the market. It's happening because highly processed toxic food is available readily on the market. It's happening because organic whole foods are really expensive and really difficult to come by, particularly in certain parts of the world. It's happening because farming is targeted and attacked. It's happened whether that's in Holland, whether that's here in the UK, whether that's in America. It's happening because experts, like people in this story, don't know their arse from their elbow and are giving quite literally life-threatening advice. You're told that seed oils and grains and things like that are brilliant for you. They should make up the basis of your diet. Seed oils are one of the worst things that you can put into your body. Most of the grains that we have are not natural. They're not how they would have been once. Most of the meat that we is filled with antibiotics, growth hormones, and loads of other rubbish. Bovine. Animals are fed grain diets, which is not their natural diet. And that then is passed into either eggs or the meat that then they produce. The milk is pasteurized and homogenized and filled with toxic crap. That's why weight gain and obesity is exploding. And it is by design. It's not an accident. On one level, yes, it's about money. On one level, cheap crap food is easier to produce and cheaper to produce, and they can sell it and they get you addicted to the sugar and all the E numbers and all the additives and all the sweeteners. Yeah, that's part of it. But the more sinister part of it, even more sinister than making money off the detriment of humanity's health, is that they want people unhealthy. They want people overweight. They want people weak and feeble and broken down. They're much easier to control. I've said this how many times? Who would you rather have a punch-up with? A bunch of fit, strong, healthy, vibrant people, or a bunch of overweight, lazy, chronically inflamed, tired, lethargic people who have got tons of health issues associated with obesity? Well, it's not really a debate, is it? And essentially, we are in a punch-up with this cult. We are in their gun sights. And we need to start thinking like that. We need to start thinking like we're preparing for a war. And I don't mean a physical war of actually fighting in the streets. We're preparing for a psychological war. We are in one. And we are preparing for a war of consciousness. Well, you can't just turn up and expect to win. Gaining knowledge is brilliant. That's one way to arm yourself, to prepare yourself. But another massive way is to take care of your physical health, because you can have your mind, but if you don't have your physical health to allow you to do those things, to allow you to read, research, to allow you to go to protests, to allow you to be around for a long time, to allow you to look after and encourage the people around you. If you don't have those things because you don't have your physical health, what use are you? And there is people out there that will be watching this that will have physical health issues through no fault of their own. Obviously, I'm not talking to you, but the people who have who understand this information, understand that everything out there is designed essentially to make you unhealthy. If you're still going along with that, what's the point in having the knowledge that this is the agenda? What's the point of it? There is none. You might as well just live in ignorance. Now, I'm not sitting here preaching that you should never have a drink, that you should never have a fast food takeaway or anything like that. I'm not going to sit here and say that. I do that. You know, I get had to go out if I post a picture with a drink, which is rare, I'll add. But it's about making your normal looking after yourself. So I say to people, this is very simple. And when you break it down like this, it's actually very easy. If you eat 3 meals a day, that's 21 meals in a week. If 2 of those meals are do what you want, that means 19 of your meals are really good, healthy, nutritious. Make them food that you know is going to nourish your body, that's going to do benefit to your body. It's not going to be at the detriment of it. That's not a bad ratio, is it? 19 out of 21. But most people would have something not great on a daily basis. And the fact that we've got to the point where obesity is projected to be nearly 4 billion people by 2050 is out of hand, to the point that I don't know how we come back from it unless there is a hard reset. And as I said, people that understand this information start to really go, hang on a minute, this has gone way too far. We're playing into their hands. We're giving them the opportunity to make us unhealthy. And also, we're feeding and funding the very companies and institutions that we don't like, that we know are there and are designed essentially to kill us slowly. Whether that's the fast food chains, whether that's the soft drink chains, whether that's the highly processed food chains. There's so many out there. It's time to put our money where our mouth is. Right, final story today. Excuse me. I made a coffee and I haven't touched it yet, so I'm going to have a drink. Wow. That is strong. Okay. Civil service, relocation, and AI officials at the heart of the government cost-cutting measures. Saving money from the civil service is a key part of the Labour government's attempts to reduce state spending. Okay, so there's 2 things to look at here. Is state spending out of control? Absolutely. Does the civil service need to be the size it is? Absolutely not. Is there a number of positions that are pure bureaucracy, red tape, inclusion positions that just are not needed? Absolutely. Is there money being spent in areas that's not needed while it's not being spent in areas that it is needed? 100%. Is this going to change anything? No. So, AI civil servants. Now, the reason this story is important because, 1, it's getting rid of jobs. And secondly, it's again increasing the involvement of AI within our daily lives to the point that it's actually being involved in government, which I would suggest is, again, as I said, with the assisted dying bill, it's a step one. It's a foot in the door to what will come next. There's already been talks and there already is examples of AI involvement within the military. Now it's getting into days of government. So the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology is claiming that a new swathe of tools to help sift through information submitted to the public consultations could save 75,000 days of manual analysis every year. That's roughly the work of 333 civil servants. The suite of AI tools are known as Humphrey, after Humphrey Appleby, the fictional character in the TV comedy Yes, Prime Minister. The government has previously said that the introduction of AI would help reduce the civil service headcount, with hopes it could save as much as 45 billion. Technology Secretary Peter Kyle appeared to take aim at the expensive outsourcing contracts, saying no one should be wasting time on something AI can do quicker and better. Step one. AI taking jobs is something that we have seen growing more and more in recent years, whether that be checkouts in supermarkets, whether that be automated ticketing services, whatever it might be. AI involvement in human life daily is increased significantly, especially in Western nations. And it's been highlighted that where are these jobs going to go when people need them? People are going to be out of work. I believe 4 million people almost, or it was around 4 million last time I looked, of people in this country work in checkouts. What happens when all of those are automated? What happens when the civil service gets rid of a number of people from positions to replace them with AI? What do those people do for work? Well, the short answer is they probably become dependent on the state. So there's two ways of looking at this, or two parts of this story to look at. One is that the AI involvement in daily lives is increasing, and that again is a stepping stone. It's getting people more and more used to AI and technology being involved in decision-making processes, in daily interactions and so on. That's one aspect of it. We've spoken extensively about that. We know where that's planned to lead. The other one is this won't actually save any money, and it won't actually redistribute the tasks and the attention of the civil service into things that people want it pushed into. What it's going to do is it's going to automate and take away jobs from people that are being done, and those jobs are still going to be done. They're just going to be done by AI. It's not like saying, actually, the civil service is spending X amount of time and X amount of money focusing on this issue, when this issue actually isn't an issue. It's a non-issue to people. While over here, there's a big thing that people are concerned about. There's a big topic that people are discussing that they want addressing. We're going to redistribute that attention over here. That's not what they're suggesting. So the civil service isn't going to change. It's not going to improve. It's not going to become more efficient. It's not going to get better and deal with the problems and the issues of the country that people want facing. It's just going to get a load of people out of their job and replace them with technology. So actually, this is going to change nothing. And funnily enough, that 45 billion that's apparently going to be saved, do you think any of us are going to see any of that? Do you think any of that is going to be redistributed into projects and into initiatives that actually benefit people in this country? Of course it's not. It's probably going to go on a new carbon catcher or a new wind farm. We have a government, and we have governments around the world that have nothing but contempt for the people that they are supposedly there to represent. I wrote an article on this yesterday, that people are scared of their governments, but they don't seem to understand how messed up that dynamic is. 650 MPs in this country represent over 70 million people. That mathematics does not make sense. That doesn't add up. That doesn't explain why most or the majority of those 70 million are scared of their government. And in fact, they're scared of one man. They're scared of one person's choices, one party's decisions, one party's policies. One party that got 9 million votes of 72 million people. And they're running the country where people are genuinely terrified of what is going to come next, what taxes are going to change, what safety on the streets is going to be like, what the workplace environment is going to be like, what new censorship laws will be passed. People have become so apathetic to the fact that their governments will lie, their governments will manipulate, that they just accept it as a way of life. They accept conflicts they don't want. They accept taxes they don't think are just. They accept immigration policies and ridiculous levels of unfairness. They just accept it because they think, well, what can I do? Well, the answer is actually quite simple, is we can do a hell of a lot if we are willing to look in the mirror and say enough is enough, and I'm going to live the rest of my life, and I'm going to live my life daily based on the fact that I'm not doing this anymore. Enough is enough. So going through the stories that we've discussed today, if you fall into that category, that maybe you don't take the greatest care of your health, start doing that. Start researching, start reading, start understanding, start putting your health at the top of the list of priorities. And you'll notice very quickly that everything else in your life will start to look a little bit better and will start to change for the better. That's one way we can push back. And that can start right now. That doesn't need to start in 6 months. That doesn't need a year's worth of savings. That could start today. Reducing the use of technology in your daily life. That could start today. Raising awareness over this assisted dying bill and where it's planned to lead. Talking to people about it. Getting other people's opinions. Maybe pushing an opinion to them that they haven't thought about before. We have to continue pushing back. We have to continue questioning. We have to continue raising awareness. Once you understand this information, you cannot simply ignore it. You cannot simply go back to sleep. It's our duty to stand up and speak up until we bring this house of cards down, because that is all it is. It's a house of cards. And we're the ones that are propping up the bottom row. And the second we take one of those cards out, it will fall in a matter of minutes. 9 million people voted for Labour in the UK. They can't rule 70 million plus people unless the 70 million plus people allow them to. They've shown us time and time again, and you can apply this to any country, they have nothing but contempt for us. They see us as cannon fodder for their wars. They see us as useless eaters. They see us as any type of adjective you can describe for worthless, for nothing. We're not nothing. We're much more than nothing. And that's why they're so terrified of us when you break it down. That's why they spend so much money, so much time devising manipulation techniques to keep humanity suppressed, to keep us from figuring out that key message that we are a hell of a lot more than we are told we are. We just forgot. And it's time we started to remember. Thank you for tuning in with me this morning. Gareth will be back with you tomorrow and Richard will be back with you on Friday. We've been doing it on our own for the last few days because we've been having a few technical issues with our main gallery computer. Hopefully they will be resolved today. So as of next week, we'll be back to normal with the two of us, myself and Gareth, or Gareth and Rich, or me and Rich, doing these shows. Hopefully you've been enjoying watching Trending. The show's brought to you by Iconic Coffee, as always. If you haven't purchased it yet, then why not give it a try? It's very good. It's high quality because obviously we're putting our money where our mouth is. It comes from really good ethical sources and it helps support the channel. So if you can, please go ahead and support us. Use the code TRENDING to get 10% off. Thanks very much for tuning in and we'll be back tomorrow. Have a great day.